This is Nick.
This is Jack.
It's Thursday, the new Friday, March 6th, and today's pod is the best one yet. This is a T-Boy.
The top 3 pop business news stories you need to know today.
Did you get your birthday spaghetti, Jack? Did you get it?
Yes, although it was controversial. My mother-in-law made me spaghetti meatballs like I asked.
Nice move.
And then she realized yesterday was Ash Wednesday.
Okay.
Eating meat was a sin.
Didn't realize that.
Good thing she's got Sunday confessions, though.
3 stories for today's T-Boy. Jack, what do we got on the pod?
For our first story, Loko, the notoriously high alcohol and high caffeine party drink, is having a renaissance.
Loko used to be a lawsuit in a can, but now it's having a comeback, and we will tell you why.
For our second story, it's shocking news from Wall Street. Europe's stock market is outperforming America's stock market since the election.
Because Europe's new growth industry is national defense.
And our third and final story, Warren Buffett just wrote a tribute to his favorite CEO of all time, who passed away last year.
This guy drives RVs, he doesn't own a computer, and he sold his company to Warren Buffett after sending him a fax. A cold fax.
But Yetis, before we hit that wonderful mix of stories.
What a fantastic mix of stories. Love the mix today, Jack.
Best-selling board game of all time hath disrupted itself.
It's the biggest change in the toy industry since Elmo got tickled.
Get this, Yetis. Monopoly just launched a fintech version of the famous board game.
Fintech Monopoly. It's actually called Monopoly App Banking, and it's a BYO phone situation.
So the famous Monopoly money, it's gone.
You must use the Monopoly app instead.
If you want a loan from the banker, that's gone too.
You must apply online instead.
Now, there's still a physical board, and there's still physical pieces that you move around the board.
But the rest of this Monopoly game is basically Venmo.
Honestly, I kind of love the idea.
I'm into it.
Because you get to play Monopoly, but without having to keep organized that unruly stack of colorful Monopoly money.
And Jack, the banker is the app, not your little sister who you can't trust not to cheat on the whole thing.
It's like Jack Dorsey became Mr. Monopoly and added a square dog.
It feels like a VC is behind this new Monopoly, Jack.
By the way, the game has the same goal. You take over the board via ruthless capitalism.
But the game has different means. Pro tip, get a Coinbase account if you want to buy Illinois Avenue.
So Yetis, the newest Monopoly is actually a digital banking app.
Because in this economy, even Monopoly is trying to cut some expenses.
It's a SaaS company, savings as a service.
Jack, let's hit our 3 stories.
15 years before this song, 2 boys from the Northeast met in the dorm. They had an idea that caused a cultural storm. It's the best one yet, but the best is the norm. Jack, Nick, that's it. I don't even think they need to practice. 50%, that's a fat tip. T-Boy City on your at-list. If you know, cause we ready to go. We can't wait no more, so just start the show. Start the show.
For our first story, Loko, the craziest alcoholic drink ever, is having a shocking renaissance.
Loko sales are surging again because of one ancient Japanese proverb.
But Yetis, for various reasons we have shared with you on this podcast, alcohol sales are down in America.
First, Ozempic makes people crave alcohol less.
Second, legalized weed is replacing alcohol sales.
And third, Gen Z, they're just not that into drunkenness.
They're hitting snooze on the booze. But there is one alcohol brand that is surprisingly up.
And it's Loko.
Or as Jack and I like to call it, Quattro Crazy.
Okay. Sales of Loko are up 64% in the last 5 years, and it's now the top-selling malt liquor in America.
Could you pour on some context for us, please?
Loko is the first drink ever to combine caffeine and alcohol and put it in one product.
It's basically like a Red Bull tequila coffee cocktail.
Invented by Ohio State grads back in 2005, it's 12% alcohol by volume, which is why they called it a blackout in a can.
Down at Sig Ep. Now let's talk the numbers here. 24 ounces in a can with 12% alcohol.
Nick, it was a huge can and it contained the same amount of alcohol as 6 Bud Lights, plus a couple Red Bulls.
And that's why it was only sold in gas stations where the fake ID was easiest to use.
When Nick and I were in college, this product was notorious.
Because it sent co-eds from 0 to 60 in 3.4 gulps.
Loko was the big man on campus until 2010. when it got banned nationwide.
Four Loko was forced to remove caffeine because of lawsuits, and their sales started slipping year after year after year.
Because the caffeine plus the alcohol in one can for like $3 at your local gas station. Once they removed the caffeine, it didn't have the appeal.
But here's the news. 15 years later, Four Loko has been resurrected.
Again, sales are up 64% since 2020.
Jack, Four Loko sales are even up 20% internationally. The French are trading Pinot for Four Loko.
I guess you were right with the whole Quattro crazy thing.
I think we're onto something here. But Yetis, the wildest part about Four Loko's success, it's that it's targeting the smallest possible audience.
Four Loko says they're targeting Gen Z, not nostalgic millennials like Nick and me who remember it from college.
Here's an interesting business model distinction. Four Loko isn't distributed to restaurants and bars like every other alcohol is.
Because the concoction is simply too crazy for the Olive Garden. I don't think their insurance policy would cover it.
So if you're only targeting Gen Z and you're not selling to retail drinking establishments, then
Four Loko is only targeting like a 2-year age group.
Yeah.
College juniors and college seniors.
Because you can basically only drink Four Loko when you're on campus. You're not going to order a Four Loko at the analyst dinner with your boss at the table.
And yet, that demo of 21 and 22-year-olds buying at their nearby college bodega, that is a high-volume customer segment.
Apparently, it's a high enough volume population that Four Loko sales are up 64% to become the #1 malt liquor.
Those numbers are so good, you don't need to hide it when public safety knocks on the door.
Excuse me, nothing in here.
They're water cups.
But besties, there is actually one product change that Four Loko made that's actually deep.
We're about to pivot from Four Loko to philosophy.
So Jack, what's the takeaway for our buddies over at Four Loko?
Four Loko practices the Japanese art of Misogi.
Yetis, Misogi is a Shinto tradition in Japan. It was actually once practiced by the ancient samurai.
Here's the concept. You should strive to do one hard new thing every year, because focusing on one challenge makes it more likely that you'll succeed and it unlocks growth.
Well, Four Loko does this. They actually introduce one major new flavor every year, and then they build hype around that one flavor for the whole year.
The CMO of the company recently said that they've seen maximum impact with their one flavor a year focus.
This year, that flavor for Four Loko is camouflage for 2025. Like the whole marketing budget of Four Loko is camo Four Loko.
It's less a flavor and more what the can looks like, right?
Just roll with it, Jack. Just roll with it. Now, besties, that singular focus, it gave the company clarity and it gave consumers clarity.
And it's having the same impact as the Japanese samurai would have wished.
Misogi, unlocking growth by committing to one big challenge for the entire year. For our second story, there's only one sector of the stock market booming right now, and that sector is European defense stocks.
With the US withdrawing from Ukraine, Europe is arming itself, and there is huge money in that.
Yetis, let's start by sprinkling on a little bit of history. Since the end of World War II, the United States became the de facto military for the whole democratic world.
But with the second election of Donald Trump, that era is officially over.
Yeah, you saw the news this week. The United States paused funding for Ukraine to defend itself from Russia's invasion.
Which means that Europe has to defend itself against Putin without America's help.
It's not just politics, it's also money, because the United States is also prepping tariffs against the European Union.
Which is going to raise prices in Europe and hurt Europe's exports to the United States.
Pardon my French, Jack, but add it all up, and that sounds like terrible news for the entire continent of Europe.
It's bad news for France, Germany, the Spanish, the Brits, and of course, the Ukrainians.
But Yetis, this is what Jack and I found fascinating about this story. It leads to a hero stat you will not believe.
European stocks are up because of all this.
Sit down, stand up, and watch the stocks again, because U.S. stocks are actually flat since the November 5th election.
Europe stocks over the same period are up by 10%. Which is the best in the world.
The index of Europe's 600 biggest stocks, it's up 10% since President Trump got elected and started pulling things away from Europe.
And one sector in particular is driving all those gains in Europe. Defense companies.
European defense companies.
Yetis, in America, we got Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and Lockheed Martin. They are profit powerhouses.
Those American companies, they're making the rockets, the grenades, the fighter jets that America and other countries buy.
But now, Europe needs to build its own weapons of war based on what Trump has done with his foreign policy.
European grenades, European fighter jets. You thought it was not possible? They got to make it possible now.
They got to DIY their own dynamite now.
Yeah, they need to basically Bob Villa their own rockets.
That's why Germany's Rheinmetall and Italy's Leonardo, two defense stocks over in Europe, have both more than doubled since Election Day.
Across the channel, England's Rolls-Royce and BAE, well, His Majesty's defense stocks are up 45 and 30% this year.
Because a whole bunch of European militaries are about to send those companies a whole bunch of new orders.
Now look, maybe President Trump changes his mind and the United States resumes funding for Ukraine's European struggle.
That's definitely possible, but honestly, it doesn't matter. Europe sees that they can't depend on the US for security against Russia anymore.
That bridge has been burned. So Jack, what's the takeaway for our buddies over in European defense?
America's Europe retreat could ironically be the best thing for Europe's economy.
Yetis, Europe's missed out on tech trends. Europe's car companies, they've lagged behind. And productivity over in Europe, the numbers show it's weak.
And the result is that for decades, the EU economy barely grew, which actually led to civil unrest and a whole bunch of political upheaval.
But then this week, the head of the EU unveiled a new plan to invest $840 billion in defense spending.
Almost $1 trillion in military orders. That's huge economic stimulus.
And then, Jack, did you see that Germany's new chancellor announced $500 billion on non-defense spending this week, too?
Almost $1.5 trillion of spending is the response to Trump's Europe retreat.
That's because Jack and I were trying to think of like an analogy here. This is like America ripped off the warm, fuzzy blanket that it's offered Europe since 1945.
And instead of being scared about that, Europe is stepping up and weaving their own blanket.
Yes, they are spending big to protect themselves in a post-America Europe.
Now, there is one big question to watch. How is a very indebted Europe going to pay for all this?
Totally fair question. But in the meantime, Europe is more united than ever. And rearming is its biggest economic stimulus in decades. Hey Yetis, if you're a bestie, take a sec and hit that subscribe button.
And like this video while you're at it. If you leave a comment, by the way, we'll read it.
For our third and final story, Warren Buffett just revealed his favorite CEO of all time, and it's a guy who made him billions of dollars.
The guy is crazy, though,
Yeah.
And he runs a random RV company.
You definitely didn't expect this, besties. But you should know, by the way, Yetis, that when Warren Buffett talks, Jack and I grab a pen, a paper, and a copy machine, and then we call each other up.
Last week, he spoke. Actually, Warren wrote.
Good point, Jack.
He wrote his annual shareholder letter for Berkshire Hathaway, so Nick and I read it.
We read the whole letter, and honestly, the best story that we found in it, what was it, Jack?
20 years ago, out of nowhere, Warren received a letter with a specific proposal.
That letter was from a man named Pete Leigel. This guy wanted to sell his recreational vehicle company, which was called Forest River, for $800 million.
1 week later, Warren met Pete in Omaha, Nebraska, and the guy said that he believed in his RV company. He wanted to keep running it, in fact, but he also wanted financial security for his family, so he was looking to sell it to get some cash.
So Warren, the greatest investor in the whole world, asked Pete to name his salary, and whatever Pete said, Warren would accept it right there.
Pete said $100,000 plus 10% performance bonuses. The two shook hands, signed papers, and the deal was done in just 1 week.
Now, Yetis, Pete, the RV entrepreneur, passed away recently at the age of 80, and that's why Warren wrote about him in his annual shareholder letter.
He continued working for Forest River, which is now owned by Berkshire Hathaway, right until his death, by the way.
But what Warren Buffett didn't know 20 years ago is that Pete Leigel is actually the George Washington on the Mount Rushmore of recreational vehicles.
Because Pete's company, Forest River, which was founded in 1997, they sell RVs and campers the size of a tank, plus they do pontoon boats for sipping marine margaritas during some batch parties.
Jack, did you know there is an RV Hall of Fame?
Oh, the Mount Rushmore of RVs?
No, like there's an actual Hall of Fame, and he was inducted into the Hall of Fame 10 years ago.
Well, his RV company does $6 billion in revenue today as a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway.
Which happens to be the same amount as Ferrari. And this RV company's growing 10% a year.
But Pete Warren's favorite CEO ever was also the craziest CEO ever.
Okay, get this, besties. Every year, Pete Lytle would take his family to Disney World for a nice casual spring break vacation.
But he insisted on taking one of the company's RVs for that 17-hour drive each way. He wanted the whole family to understand the ins and outs of his product.
But during the trip, he would not let his wife or kids use the bathroom or the shower on that RV.
Because it's a company vehicle and he intended to sell that vehicle after they got home from Disney World.
Plus, he's pretty old school. This guy had no computer and no email. He just never used either of them.
He was the ultimate founder mode founder. He had his fingerprints on everything the company did.
Okay, at one point, he went into the dumpster outside their office and measured it inside the dirty trash cans to make sure they were paying a fair price for their waste management bill.
What did he find out? The cubic volume of that dumpster was smaller than what he was paying for. So he demanded a refund.
So besties added it all up and we were curious. Why did Warren Buffett buy the $6 billion recreational vehicle business in just 1 week? With a single meeting?
Because of 6 things.
6 keys. So Jack, what's the takeaway for our buddies who are following Warren Buffett?
Warren Buffett uses 6 criteria to evaluate a company in just 6 minutes.
Yetis, when Buffett buys a company, there are 6 criteria that it must pass. And these are the 6.
It must have consistent profitability, one durable competitive advantage, and be offered at a fair price.
It also must have an honest management team in place, low debt, and be, most importantly, simple to understand.
Warren Buffett's not interested in Enron.
The Wi-Fi connects to the Bluetooth?
The world's most famous investors' most favorite investment ever fit all 6 of those criteria.
And those same 6 criteria are what guided Warren's other investments into Coca-Cola, Apple, and Geico as well.
It's a reminder how investing can be simple if done thoughtfully, and quality if done consistently.
So besties, Jack and I want to know, what are your 6 keys to decide something in just 6 minutes? Hit us up in the comments. Jack, can you whip up the takeaways for us for the new Friday?
Four Loko has made a comeback. It's the top-selling malt liquor in America, even with no caffeine in there.
Because Four Loko practices Misogi, setting a goal to do one big new thing every year.
For our second story, with Trump signaling less American support for Europe, European stocks have actually soared.
America's Europe retreat could ironically be the best thing for Europe's economy.
And our third and final story was Warren Buffett. He basically eulogized Pete Lytle, a crazy RV entrepreneur whose company he bought.
Because Warren has 6 criteria that he uses to evaluate a company in 6 minutes.
But Yetis, this pod's not over yet. Here's what else you need to know today.
First, yesterday we told you the story of the new U.S. tariffs using a single car, the Chevy Silverado.
Well, Trump might have been listening, because yesterday he announced a 1-month exemption of the North American tariffs, specifically for car companies.
The S&P 500 jumped 1% on the news yesterday, hoping that trade war 2 may slow down.
But it's another example of policy whiplash.
Policy whiplash.
For our second story, FIFA, the World Soccer Organization, is planning a new halftime show to rival the Super Bowl at the next World Cup.
By the way, the World Cup's coming to North America in 2026.
And for the final, which is at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey on July 19th, 2026, they're going to turn the halftime, which I don't think it's called halftime in soccer. I think it's called like...
Yellow card, Jack. Yellow card. You took too long.
Well, anyway, there's going to be a concert that rivals the Super Bowl halftime show.
No word yet on who the artist is, but whoever it is going to have the biggest stage in history.
And finally, HBO is bringing Harry Potter to the small screen. You know that there's a 10-season TV show coming to HBO Max.
But the newest news? Who's playing Dumbledore? Who do they got, Jack?
It's actually going to be an American. John Lithgow is playing Albus Dumbledore for 10 seasons of Harry Potter.
John Lithgow, the only American capable of playing a Brit. Now, time for the best fact yet. This one is a correction from Yeti Tim Mueller over in Edina, Minnesota.
The clarification is, how many strikes in a row do you need to get to bowl a perfect 300?
A 300 game is something that a Yeti did the other day, and we gave them a shout out. And what does that mean?
And I was like, what is that 10 strikes in a row? It's not a correction. I asked the question.
That's fair. It was a question mark at the end of that. I saw that, Jack. Well, a 300 bowling game means you threw 12 strikes in a row.
Wow.
1 per frame, 1 through 9, plus 3 strikes in your 10th frame.
And Nick still never made a turkey. He doesn't even know what a turkey is.
All I know is every time I'm eating the chicken fingers, my hand doesn't fit in the ball anymore, man. Are those pins regulation size or what? Yetis, you look fantastic today. And if there's one thing that Jack would also like for his birthday week,
It's for you to ask your buddy, HYHTBOY, and send a link to this episode.
if you know, you know, and then give us 5 stars because we love reading each and every review.
Nick and I will see you tomorrow.
Stocks are up for Jack's birthday, and we'll see you there. And before we go, a congratulations to Yeti's Luis and Maria down in Austin, Texas, who just welcomed their 3rd child. And Luis, Jack, he's been listening for years.
Congratulations to Luis and Maria.
And a shout out to Emma Foyer, a power listener, and the entire integrated marketing communications crew over at Northwestern University. Those Wildcats are Yetis.
Happy work anniversary to Walter Thurmond from Tucson, Arizona, who's been working 25 years at Raytheon, a company we mentioned earlier in the show.
And a congratulations to Savannah Westwood. Happy Professional Pet Sitters Week. You're doing a fantastic job with all those PUPPIEs.
Happy 40th birthday to Bruce Lorario in Windsor, Connecticut.
And Rachel Brock's turning 40 years old in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. She's got 3 baby Yetis and the best husband yet.
This is Jack. Nick and I both own stock of Apple, and I own stock in Berkshire Hathaway.
This is Nick.
Whoa.
Oh, sorry.
Wrong button. Wrong button.
Wrong button.
Malfunction.
Wrong button. 1 second. Let me plug myself back in. All right, here we go. 3, 2.